Good morning. No, afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Polk County School Board work session on this fine day. We will now call the work session for September 3rd, 2024 to order. I would like to thank everyone for joining us, especially our staff. I see you lined up back there and appreciate you and the time that you're going to be with us today. So, and your accessibility to us as we try to address any questions that we have. So we're humbled to serve alongside of you and the most educated, highly educated workforce and dedicated workforce in the nation. I would like to start by reading our Who Are We statement. We are the Polk County leadership and governance team. If we were to pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together to work, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and experiences to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team are: 1, operating with integrity; 2, respecting our students, staff, families, and each other; 3, establishing a culture where stakeholders feel valued, supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth; 4, supporting an approach of continuous improvement to ensure student outcomes. And then collectively, we need to work on behalf of the children that we serve and find avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There is no acceptable alternative to that. We will always collaborate in a respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff member. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because we will remain committed to supporting the whole child. So we hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create this community of lifelong learners. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Superintendent Hyde to lead us in our work session today.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board, members of the community, and staff. Thank you for being here today. This will, as you know, and it was advertised as such or explained as such, this will be an abbreviated workshop today because the board has other pressing matters and discussions to take place today. So we went ahead and forfeited some time to allow you to do that. However, there are several important topics that we do need to address this afternoon. First up is Mr. Andy Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin will provide you with an update on our 24-25 ESEA consolidated applications. Mr. Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. Good afternoon, board members. This item is for our 24-25 ESEA consolidated application. You may recall that in the past, last year, we brought the consolidated application as well, but previous to that, each one of these grants would have had a separate application and an award, whereas this year and last year, the Florida Department of Education has combined all of these applications into one consolidated application, so all of these grant programs are being presented to you today together. Total for the ESEA programs for this year is just over $77 million. The largest portion is in our Title I Part A grant, which is just over $54 million, which includes roll forward from the previous year. Title I Part A is what most people recognize as Title I schools. So if a school is called a Title I school, they receive funding through this grant application. Title I Part C is the migrant education program. This is sometimes confused with immigrant education, but in this case, the Title I Part C grant is specific to migrant students who migrate throughout the country working in the agricultural and fishing industries. Title I Part D is about neglected and delinquent, so we receive some supplemental funding to provide some additional supports for our students that are in delinquent facilities, neglected residential facilities, as well as delinquent residential facilities, especially in transition support. Title II Part A has a few different areas of focus we'll talk about in a minute, but its primary focus is on professional development. And Title III Part A is language instruction for English language learners and immigrant students. Title IV Part A is student support and academic enrichment. It is one of the grants that provides a little bit wider range of services to our students, so we'll talk about some of the things that we're doing in that program as well. And again, the total is just over $77 million for this fiscal year. Title I Part A has several different areas of focus. I won't go into each one of these in detail, but you can see that there's a wide range of things that we do for our students. Not all of these we have dedicated money within the grant for example, transportation and foster care. Our grant program under Title I Part A doesn't necessarily allocate money for these programs, but we do have requirements under those, so we do have to address those in the application. I did bring some of my staff with me today so that you guys can put some names with faces. Allie Dort is our director for Title I Part A. Allie, give us a wave. She does a great job. She manages a very large grant, as you can see, and she does an exceptional job of keeping everything organized, making sure that we are spending our money effectively and efficiently, and that it's going to work for our students in our schools every day. The largest portion of this amount of money goes to our schools in the form of allocations to our Title I schools. The vast majority of that funding is spent on additional support staff for the schools, such as coaches, interventionists, and paraeducators. Anything that the schools need through a needs assessment process, we provide to the schools through their allocation. We also provide some money for college and career readiness, administrative costs. The majority of those costs are indirect costs, so it's not necessarily money that the district is spending, but the district is able to recoup indirect cost for managing the grant. So there's a recognition that whenever we have $77 million coming in the form of grant money, it takes additional support staff to help us spend that money. For example, the people in the finance office who are helping us pay the bills, we don't pay their salary, but the grant allows us a certain percentage for the district to recoup to be able to pay those things, as well as keep the lights on and that type of thing. We also have early childhood programs. We provide services to private school students. Each one of our federal entitlement programs requires that we provide an equitable amount of services for students that are participating in private schools. There's formulas that help us calculate how much we have to provide to the private school students, and that's represented here under the private school area. We also reserve a certain amount for parent and family engagement, as well as different educational services, homeless education services such as the Hearth program. And then we also have a neglected and delinquent reservation within the Title I Part A grant, which is in addition to the Title I Part D grant that we'll see in just a minute. As you can see, the vast majority of our money for this program goes to staff. All told, and throughout all of our grant programs, we have about, the grant programs within ESEA, because we have a lot of other grant programs as well. But just within the ESEA grant programs, we have over 700 staff that we provide for Polk County students. There are some additional supplemental areas for Title I Part A, the biggest being the student achievement portion, as well as the preschool education and professional development activities. Okay, on to Title I Part C now. Again, I mentioned, yes, sir.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Baldwin. I just have a quick question on the Part A. When you talk about the services provided to private schools, is that similar? I don't want people to misunderstand that all services are provided. Is that similar to other grants that they decide what services will be provided? Or are you saying that we duplicate all services?
We do not duplicate all services. The primary services we provide under Title I Part A are third-party tutoring services for students. We also have another allowable service that we can provide is academic guidance services for students that qualify. So let me get into a little bit about which students at the private schools qualify. So we allocate the funds based on the number of students that are at the private schools that reside in a Title I attendance area. So let's say student Johnny would normally go to one of our Title I schools, but he is enrolled in a Title I private school. We are required by the federal law to provide the same allocation that student would receive at the Title I school to that private school for that student to receive services, only if that student is academically eligible for services. So if Johnny would be going to a Title I school, we have to technically allocate the funding, but we only spend that money on that private school student if that student is academically eligible. So if Johnny has a 4.0 and he's scoring very high on all of his test scores, we don't spend the money for that student because he doesn't have any academic needs for that.
Do we push the money to the school, or do we manage the payment to the tutoring service?
We do not pass money through to any private schools. We make the purchases on behalf of the private school. So we have what are called service delivery plans. Jeannie Vasquez, she is our new senior coordinator for equitable services. So she helps throughout the entire year do consultation with the private schools to identify their needs. We complete service delivery plans so that we understand the exact services that will be provided to each one of the private schools. And then we work with the third-party vendor when that's appropriate to meet those. But the money is never actually passed through to the private schools. We maintain control.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So again, the Title I Part C Migrant Education Program is focusing on those students who migrate throughout the year to work in the agricultural and fishing industries. A lot of our students are up in Michigan or North Carolina right now working on different areas, and then about October, November, a lot of them will start migrating back to the state of Florida where they'll work in some of the industries down here. And so we see a large influx of our students in October, especially into November. Over the past few years, our migrant education numbers have come down quite a bit because not as many of our students, we still have a lot of students whose family are working in the agricultural and fishing industries. They're just not moving with their parents. So we have seen a decrease in our numbers and a little bit of decrease in our allocation over time. But we view that, or at least me personally, as a good thing because that means they're not getting an educational interruption, which is requiring these additional services. So we're seeing that as a net positive that even though we're getting less money, we're not having the students that are having that interruption. Four main focus areas on the migrant education are K through 12 instructional services, early childhood, identification and recruitment, and parent and family engagement and support services. The vast majority of our funds for this go to our K through 12 instructional services where we provide intervention teachers and paraeducators and tutoring services for our students that are moving in and out of our county. As you can see, we have 5 teacher intervention spots or positions that we have throughout our county. Though we have some that we have one person that works specifically in the Mulberry area, but the others are for the most part split among the different high concentration areas for migrant, which would be Fort Meade, Frostproof. A little bit less in the Lake Wales area, but we still have some students that are living in the Lake Wales area and moving, and then some additional support for students throughout the rest of the county. So we have a little bit of students in the Mulberry, or I'm sorry, like the Juanita area, in the Lakeland area, and we try to make sure the services are provided in those areas of concentration. Okay, I mentioned some of these before. The majority of our money is spent on academic services and a little bit on some support services for our students. So some of our students need help in providing, getting transportation to different doctor's events or doctor's visits and things like that. Occasionally we are able to provide that type of support as well, but the vast majority of our money is spent on academic services. Okay. Any questions about Title I Part C? Title I Part D is our program for neglected and delinquent. There are 3 main focus areas, but almost all of our money is spent on Area Focus 2, where we provide transition facilitators for our students that are transitioning in and out of our residential and neglected and delinquent facilities. So about $200,000 of our $218,000 is spent on the transition services. And through that, we provide 2 FTE, so it's not actually 2 people. All of our transition facilitators are split among district level or district provided money and then the grant funded. And then so they're able to provide support to all students regardless of which facility they're residing in. Title II Part A, as I mentioned before, its primary focus is on professional development, or the new nomenclature is professional learning. We're also able to provide some money for recruitment and retention, and Area Focus 3 is prioritizing effective teachers for high needs students. The largest portion of our Title II grant dollars go to providing curriculum specialists and senior coordinators of instruction for our students. We also transitioned the full release mentor program from our ESEA program into Title II this year so that we can maintain that program, as it was shown to be very effective at providing support to our new and novice teachers. And then you can see almost all of those additional programs are, the vast majority of our funding, again, goes to staff to provide support. There are a lot of areas of, a lot of programs within our area of Focus 1 for professional learning. I won't go into depth into each one of those, but if anybody has any questions about those, I'll be happy to answer questions. Same thing with Area Focus 2, which focuses on our recruitment and retention. The grant does provide us with some money to hire some recruitment and retention staff at the district level to help us fill all of those vacancies that we typically have during the summer and throughout the year. And the prioritizing effective teachers for high need students, the Area Focus 3 under Title II. You can see that a large portion of our money is spent in this area because we have some schools that have had some high needs in the past. And as Mr. Hyde shared in the past, our schools have made some tremendous strides in the last couple of years in the form of academic results. So I think that these programs are being shown to work pretty well. Title III Part A is language instruction for English language learners and immigrant students. Ms. Caraballo wasn't able to be here today. She's the primary leader for this grant. I do provide grant support, and so that all of the grant programs can be coordinated under one umbrella, but Ms. Caraballo and Mr. Alfredo Gonzalez provide the actual programs for these because I'm by no means an expert in providing ELL support. Area Focus 1 is on English language proficiency, Area Focus 2 is on professional development, and Area Focus 3 is on professional development, or I'm sorry, parent and family engagement. The majority of funds are spent to provide academic services for our ELL students, with some funding be provided for professional development opportunities, and some additional money for parent and family engagement opportunities. Our Title IV Part A grant has 3 main areas of focus, and the program coordinator for this is Kelly Jarrett. And I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce Dee Dee Wright. Dee Dee Wright, she is our senior coordinator who manages our Title I Part C and Title I Part D programs. So my apologies, Dee Dee. All right, back to Title IV. Title IV Part A has 3 parts. Area Focus 1 is well-rounded education, so we're able to provide some support for our PE, fine arts programs, those types of things that make up our well-rounded education within the district. We also have an area focus devoted to safe and healthy learning conditions, so we have some different initiatives each year which are focused on safe and healthy learning conditions. And then we're also able to provide some support for effective use of technology. The effective use of technology is really focused on using the technology and not necessarily buying the technology. So we have caps on how much equipment we can buy. So the focus should mostly be on training on how to use that equipment or implementing the equipment in the classroom and not necessarily buying the equipment itself. A large portion of our Title IV grant goes to the community outreach program, which is under the Safe and Healthy Schools program. So our program that was implemented a couple years ago to provide support for our attendance issues that we've been having since the pandemic. A large portion of this goes to provide those units for that program. As you can see under Area Focus 1, well-rounded education, we have a lot of initiatives that go under this, and it enables us to provide a lot of support for some of the programs that don't traditionally have a very large operating budget, so they're able to do some additional programs to provide our students some additional opportunities. Under safe and healthy learning conditions, I already mentioned the community outreach staff. We also are able to provide ISS paras at several of our high schools and some of our middle schools so that our students are not having to do out-of-school suspension. They can now do in-school suspension, which provides them a safe learning environment as opposed to being out for out-of-school suspension. We also this year added a dropout prevention program, and you'll see a couple job descriptions for an assistant director for the graduation enhancement and for a technician for graduation enhancement. And they will work along with this, with the dropout prevention program to make sure that our students are staying in school and that they are not dropping out. As I mentioned, the effective use of technology is really focused on support for technology and not actually buying it. So there are 2 main programs, our extended summer contracts for our teacher and para network managers so that they can continue providing support to the schools during the summer when they would traditionally be out of contract. Okay, that's my presentation. I'm happy to take any additional questions.
I just want to say thank you. You know, the funds, there's a lot of money that you guys just brought in, and we appreciate it, truly. This is something that helps supplement us to where, you know, the district isn't footing all this bill. You know, it's really important, and I don't want to, there's a lot there, but I just want to make sure you and your staff know that I appreciate it. Without these funds, we'd be, you know, it'd be really hard to, basically, we can divert more of our funds to being able to do other things in our district because you're able to bring these funds in for us, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Allen?
Yeah, just to follow up on that as well, I just appreciate the, you know, the knowledge and the information to inform us. Great to have your team with us as well. I always appreciate when you bring these items forward to us. I'm sort of seeing it from a different lens now as well, and would love to spend some time with you. Just twofold. I know with the Florida School Board Association, they're wanting to bring a little bit more knowledge around federal programs in particular for school board members around the state. So I'm intrigued with that a bit, but I also have the opportunity, I'll actually be in DC next week representing the Florida School Board Association as the chair of the federal advocacy. And so I'll be in that role for this next year. So I'm wondering if I can connect with you all in some way as we're working on legislative and advocacy platforms that would then go up to COSBA at the national level for next year's conference. So love to spend more time with you. So I'm just seeing it differently, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. So thank you.
I'd be happy to meet with you whenever you're available.
Yeah, indeed.
We need, respectfully, we need Mr. Pitts and Ms. Jenkins to facilitate that conversation, please. Thank you.
All right.
Ms. Fields?
Yes, I just wanted to know, is there a list that shows the private schools that we are providing funds to?
Yes, we can provide that list to you. All of the private schools that we provide services to are not-for-profit schools that are within the Polk County areas, but we can provide that list to you.
Along with the amount?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Baldwin, there are no further questions. Thank you, sir. Board members, the reorg will come at the next meeting. Mr. Pitts will address 2 additional departments at that time. At this time, Mr. Pitts will address the memorandum of understanding with the Central Florida Healthcare offices regarding parking space. Board members and those who are new, we owned a very small parcel of land immediately across the street from Dreadnought Stadium. And it was a parcel that was largely unusable by the school district because of the setbacks and other issues, requirements. Initially, I had thought that we had retained that parcel for parking. We met with the boosters, we met with the school, we met with the community, none of whom had any interest in maintaining that parcel of land for that purpose. And again, the setback requirements, because of its location on a main road, would have precluded a large portion of that property from being usable. So we entered into an agreement several years ago to sell that property to Central Florida Healthcare. As part of that sale, we requested rights for parking for athletic events and other events that may take place there. Mr. Pitts is here to provide you with an update as to that process.
Yes, in front of you, there are two documents, I think, that are attached to this item. One's an actual MOU. And that MOU, as Central Florida Healthcare is expanding and building new space there in front of Bryant Stadium, they need additional parking. And so the parking lot that we own that Mr. Hyde was talking about, this would allow them to use some designated space during regular business hours. However, if we would have an event there at Bryant Stadium that we would need that additional parking, we still maintain the right to have that whole parking lot, and they would have to find somewhere else to park at that time. We haven't had that happen in the last couple of years since we've owned Bryant Stadium, but that MOU maintains that right that we have, I guess, first dibs on the parking if we would need it. So that is what the first MOU is. The second document is an easement agreement that will be between the School Board of Polk County and the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District. And what they are wanting to do is build an additional stop, a bus stop, in front of Bryant Stadium that would be directly across the street from Central Florida Healthcare. The nearest bus stop that exists is quite a distance away from Central Florida Healthcare, and they've actually had a couple of folks hit this year by a car, and so they're requesting an easement so a bus stop could be built in front of Bryant Stadium. Both of these can be signed by the superintendent, but I wanted to bring it before you just for your own information so you know of our partnership there with Central Florida Healthcare.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. I just want to, it's been years ago and there's new board members. I don't know who initiated this conversation or facilitated it, but they came to us a while back and it was a quick no. So between the superintendent and your staff that went out to the community and had the conversation about the need, the fact that this will benefit the community not only for Central Florida Healthcare, but adding that bus stop. I just appreciate that you guys had that conversation. We were able to come to terms they can agree with. The fact that we don't need the parking, I guess that's good right now, but I'm assuming that's overflow parking for the games.
It is overflow.
Okay. When we have the overflow parking, in that agreement, is there a security issue or anything that we have to cover for that parking space area?
We don't currently supervise any of the parking around that stadium.
Okay.
Security.
But we
Now,
do,
if-
but there is supervision from the city crossing that street.
Well, if there's an outside organization that rents Bryant Stadium.
Right.
Okay, and if they're going to need to use that parking space, we will require additional security.
Okay.
And those use
rented-
for use of agreement,
Okay.
like use of facility agreements.
It's a part of their use of facility?
Yes.
Okay. And they work out the city as well for the cross traffic or the crossing if they need that in that facilities agreement?
That
I just don't want the liability.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
The answer is actually yes, they would have to
Okay.
request that, but they don't request that through us. We do not facilitate that aspect. They would facilitate that directly with a request to Lakeland PD.
Okay.
The school district does not have the rights to assign officers, and especially now that we've consolidated under sheriff's office, we could, if Lakeland PD was unable to but willing, they could defer that responsibility to the sheriff's office and they could be reimbursed that way. So there are options available to outside groups, but for our events, yes, there is always an officer. In fact, I think there's 2 officers positioned out there for traffic and pedestrian safety.
But just for traffic, not for security of the parking?
We do not have any parking lot security.
Do you know if there's signage? I just want people to know if they park there that we're not securing your vehicle and or your safety.
There is, I would have,
Okay.
I don't
find
know
out.
that I don't know that signage exists that says that.
To be signage, and if there are handicap spots, those need to be strictly observed.
Correct.
Thank you. That's probably not your purview, Jason, but it's good that we're having that conversation.
The current space is it's pretty much grass. It's not a land of concrete.
If somebody trips in that grass, it's our liability, right, Wes? If somebody trips and falls in that parking area,
It is fact-specific.
okay.
It is we can get into the law school definitions, but if it is a
No, I
latent
understand.
defect and is hidden and we know about it, it's a problem. Yeah.
Okay.
But if it's an obvious one and if there's a hole and they step in it and they shouldn't have stepped in it, that's on them.
And lighting and stuff is considered in that fact specific?
Could be.
Thank you.
It's all very fact-specific.
Ms. Fields?
I just want clarity on the overflow parking. I want to make sure, because I've heard from others complaining about not being able to park and sometimes being hassled a bit. So is that pretty much etched in stone here?
And let me understand your question, that folks that are attending our events have not had places to park, or?
Yes.
I have not heard that complaint. We have the right to maintain the whole field if we have an event. They would have to find other parking for Central Florida Healthcare. We still maintain that right. The MOU still gives us the right on an event to let them know ahead of time we're going to have an event. But I have not personally heard that complaint.
Okay, well, I have.
Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll follow up and provide a map, because there's actually multiple parking lots that are available and are facilitated through a local church as well. So I've not been
Yes.
aware, Mr. Talbot's not made me aware of any concerns, because there's also overflow parking at the Lakeland Regional Healthcare Center in the back of that property as well. So we would want to make sure we look at that. But those properties are not our properties, they're simply used in partnership. And I believe that they charge a small nominal fee for parking over there, but I'll get confirmation of that. It's been years since I've looked at this issue.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you are correct, everything is pretty much grass. I don't think there are any handicap parking spaces. I don't believe.
I don't believe so either, no. No, ma'am.
I believe that that's part of their redevelopment plan. That's why we got into this, was it was going to be gated and we didn't want to lose those spots. The concern initially was were those parking spots typically reserved for boosters or for VIPs? You know, every school sells the rights for priority parking at events and things. I didn't want to we didn't want to create an issue where that was no longer available to the schools. And both the Booster Club and schools indicated that that was not what they used. They actually, to put the priority parking on the same side as Dennison Stadium. So we can, but I'll get some confirmation, some updates on the other areas. But yes, it's all grassed. It's all grass. I'm not,
That would be awful.
that would be outside of us, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Allen?
Yeah, question about the easement in regards with the Lakeland Transit. Was looking at the map and then just thinking about my experience driving through that area during game time and other events and so forth. Was there a traffic study done or anything like that? And when just looking at the image, you know, it's not an extra lane that they're putting in that easement. They're just plopping the bus stop right there. And that's pretty much where all the pedestrian traffic currently is that's crossing over in that spot. So I just curious what kind of, is there more angles to this that we're just not seeing in regards to a traffic study or anything like that was done on that particular easement?
I would have to get back to you on that. I'm not aware of a traffic study. I just know the city of Lakeland was heavily involved in the Lakeland area mass transit was involved. And this has been in the works they've been looking at this for a year and a half, but I'm not privy to know if there was a study done.
Yep.
So I would have to follow up with the answer to that.
And I think the question is, you know, if they were putting an additional lane there, would allow that traffic to move, but if you're literally, your stop's right there in that primary traffic, I think there's going to be a concern there, but I'm sure they've got all the background work done on that already. I was just curious if there was more information to it.
It was my understanding that there was going to be an egress area
Okay.
there.
All right, very
But
good.
I can get you confirmation of that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pitts.
There are no further questions, Mr. Pitts.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Superintendent Hyde. All right, so you can see at this point, this is a very short meeting for us, and the intent was for us to spend time together at the 2:30 meeting, and that's still the plan at this point, unless you have otherwise. But at this point, that will stand as far as our 2:30 special meeting that was called to discuss the general counsel. And then just going through our agenda for this evening, I would like to go through that as well. And then we have some new business and some board comments as well. All right, so let's transition to tonight's meeting. And I'm going to open up my agenda. All right, so if we're ready, I'll go ahead and move through our agenda for tonight. And as typical, A through C, you can see that. I'm excited as you'll see that we're starting to expand the grade level for our guest tonight. So we have Mr. Norris, who's an 8th grader from Lakeland Highlands Middle, that will be joining us tonight as our guest. So that'll be a different look on that. So excited about that change. So A through C, going from there, we have D through H. If you have any comments, D through H. As we move then down through our consent agenda, sections I through J. If you have any comments on those items. All right.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm the district reorg we're still voting on tonight, even that is separate from what we went over?
The only thing you'll vote on tonight is what the board has been presented
Already
to date.
presented, okay. I just wanted to confirm.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Wyatt. Sections K through L. K through L. Ms. Fields, you're recognized.
Can we go back to Jay, please? The district reorganization, superintendent, how are we able to attach that to the agenda?
I apologize. I was looking for contact information for Citrus Connection. Could you restate that, please?
Jay, the district reorganization, I said, can you attach the information for that approval? I think we had it last work session, I believe.
I'll have Mr. Pitts work with staff to get that attached. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fields.
Carry over reorg.
All right, we're on K through L. K through L at this point. And then section M through P. Any questions, comments? Very good. All right, and now we're going to move down to our action items. That would be section Q tonight.
No, I was just going to send an email because.
And then I'm going to move down to section R, which is our public hearing. We have the one policy update as well, and then finalizing our budget. All right, board members, thank you very much. Then we'll have our superintendent's report tonight. Mr. Bridges, would you have something for us this evening?
I might have a word or two.
All right. Very good. I appreciate that. And Ms. Matthews, anything for us tonight? All right. I'll note the couple wrap-ups from Ms. Matthews that we received via email. And then we'll wrap up with our comments and public comments as well. All right. Any other questions on the agenda for tonight? All right. Very good. I'm going to pop back over to our work session. So we are now moving to new business, which is the discussion of dietary modifications.
There we go.
All right, board members. Ms. White, you are recognized.
Thank you. So last week, I'm sure several of you got the same emails that I did. And in talking to Superintendent Hyde, I think if 2 weeks ago you had asked me if our students have the right to bring lunch to school, I would have unequivocally said yes without looking at policy. And then that is not actually codified in policy. So in doing a little bit of research, policy number 5780 is our student and parents' rights. If you'll remember when we went through our mask outcome of 2020 with COVID, we added to the policy that students had a right not to wear masks. Some other interesting things in this policy, on page 5, students have a right to bring and wear sunscreen to school, which I found very interesting that we put that in policy. But I would like to have a conversation about adding to policy that students have the right to bring lunch. I think that that's something that's important to our families. I think it's something that's important that we offer that opportunity to our students for a variety of reasons, but I think that that should probably be something that's in policy. When Superintendent Hyde and I talked on Friday, if our policy was perfect, then there wouldn't be a need for board members. And oftentimes we will find things that we just didn't realize needed to be in there. So I'd like to propose us looking at that policy to add a line about allowing students to bring lunch.
All right. Ms. White, thank you. So board members, if you have any feedback, any thoughts on this particular item? All right, Mr. Sharpless, you're recognized.
Well, I would say the nature of it, I'm very supportive. But I just was curious where in our policy Board Member Wyatt, you think that would be appropriate? Would you think potentially adding us at a certain area or? Yeah.
I would say most likely under the health section. but that's, if the board feels differently, there seem to be several areas that are clustered together and then several areas that are standalone. So health seems to make sense to me, but if others feel differently, we can certainly look at adding its own section for that.
All right, anything else, Mr. Sharpless?
No, I'm good.
Okay, Ms. Miller, you're recognized.
I also think that if you want to have this discussion, that we could do that at that time to add it to a work session. But at that work session, I would be interested in knowing what other districts' policies look like and if that is something that they have in policy. It is interesting what we do in procedural things and in policy, but I'm not opposed to having that discussion at work session. But at that time, I would like to see what other districts that are our size have in their policies regarding the lunches. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Miller. I would like to draw attention to our attorney on this here momentarily, and we can just remind our board members on the rulemaking process and the changes we made and how we can address that moving forward. Ms. Fields, you are recognized.
I agree with Ms. Miller. I think that is something that we can bring up for discussion. But also when we're discussing it, I would like to have us look at policy 8500, because I think it kind of covers some of the dietary modifications that Ms. White is speaking about.
Thank you. That's actually originally when I sent it to Wes, I said, this may be the policy to go in, and then realized that we have all of these rights outlined, but either place, I think, as long as it's codified that our families have that right.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fields. So, yeah, just Mr. Bridges, if we can maybe address this a little bit. And again, I would just say, yes, I agree with our policy as it relates to parental rights. And I would just say in general, the superintendent, I think that you handled the situation properly. I think supporting our staff and their concerns. I think the empathy from, in this whole narrative appealed to me a bit, especially as we think about the care that we have and the responsibility we have with our students and as recent, the situations in other counties that have happened and student death and so forth around this topic, I think is of concern. So, but in general, I think the idea around parental rights and how that is applied to this particular issue is important to me as well. So, Mr. Bridges, I don't know if you want to maybe guide us through this process.
Certainly. As you'll recall, a couple of months ago, we had a lengthy conversation about the procedure that needs to be used to bring rules to fruition. Rulemaking is governed by the provisions in Chapter 120 of the Administrative Procedures Act, and it's pretty specific. And first off, there has to be a grant of statutory authority to the school board to adopt a policy on a particular topic. Don't think there's any question that that exists in this case. Once you have that, the public has an interest in being able to see the development of that policy. It has to be transparent. To that end, we would do a notice of rulemaking, of proposed rulemaking, rule development, which typically would be held at a work session. That is a conversation for the school board members. That is not a time for public comment. That is the chance that you have to have input into the rulemaking process. Once that is done and there is a proposed text, that can be brought to the school board. If there is proposed text at the work session, that can be first reading. If not, it can be brought at a later date. Ultimately, there will be two readings, and the second one is when you do the adoption. But the first reading, it would be typically the public hearing where the public has the opportunity to weigh in on the proposed rule. Once the language has been developed, it's in what we think is a final form. We advertise for the public hearing on that, and that is your second reading. It gives you the opportunity once again to have any input into the language that has been brought. And if you choose to make changes, they can be done at that time if they are foundational changes, if they are significant, if they significantly change the effect of the policy, then I would recommend you consider bringing it back through the rulemaking process once more. Because once again, you may have members of the public who have an interest in what the language is turned into, rather than the language that was originally presented. So yeah, that's the process. You would need to have a rule development workshop, and there would need to be an opportunity for the public to have input at a public hearing. I will tell you that when this arose last week, there's been considerable conversation with board members, and I've had considerable contact with school board attorneys on this. And to the best of my knowledge to date, we have not heard from any districts that have a policy on this topic. So this was a case of first impression to me. I know when the question came in, I thought, I've been here 26 years and this question has never come up. But here it is. So you absolutely have the authority to make rules in this area if you so choose. I would counsel you to be circumspect in doing so, because sometimes, well, you've heard about the law of unintended consequences. You want to make sure that what you're doing accomplishes what you want it to do, but that it also does not accomplish things that you do not want it to do, which is always the challenge.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bridges.
Yes, sir.
Board members, any other thoughts, comments, any angles, perspectives that you wish to hear as we move towards a work session item around this? Mr. Sharpless, you're recognized.
My next question is, if this is something that we're, wanting to bring up to a work session, who drafts this? Would this be something that's drafted by our board attorney, by a board member, or by staff? I know we have recommendations that go through Ms. Griffin and Mr. Davis, but those normally are the ones coming from Neola. So this is something that we would potentially want to develop. So who has the authority, or who has the responsibility, better word, of drafting this policy?
Yeah, great question.
The answer to your question is yes, all of them. It can come from any direction. Typically, when we're developing policy, it's generated internally. Typically, it would be run through our contacts with Neola, who is our consultant, and who guarantees our compliant, that policies they provide to us are compliant with Florida law. So before we adopted anything, we would no doubt want to have the folks at Neola give it a good scrub. But yes, the input, I know Mrs. Wyatt has provided some language that may be good language. If other board members have additional language, whenever there's a notice of rulemaking and we have a meeting to discuss that, that's the time to bring your language. And frankly, if you bring it in advance, then we can look at it and see if it's tight, see if it appears to be constitutional on its face, things that sometimes our legislature doesn't do. I didn't say that, did I? But yeah, it would give us an opportunity to look at it in advance and make sure once again that it accomplishes what we think you want it to accomplish, without accomplishing things that you do not want it to accomplish.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Anything else, Mr. Sharpless?
That's all.
Okay, Ms. Wyatt, you're recognized.
Thank you. I was just going to say that I'd be happy to help shepherd this, as we're obviously transitioning attorneys between now and our next work session, but to work with Mr. Murphy and then also the superintendent's office to help. We're not transitioning superintendents. I'm so sorry. Listen, I apologize. You never know. We're not transitioning superintendents between now and the next work session. But I'd be happy to shepherd this to make sure.
And I will
it doesn't
say,
get dropped in the
I will tell
transition.
you, I think there is reason to be comfortable and not too terribly anxious about that proceeding. Boswell and Dunlap has been in the business of administrative procedure for years and years and years. Two gentlemen that are in the back today, John Murphy and David Carmichael, are both well-versed in it. And Drew Crawford is an absolute whiz. So I leave you in good hands for that purpose.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bridges. Ms. Fields, you're recognized.
I just wanted to make sure that it was emphasized that when we come with the language, to please make sure that it is in writing and that it is given to us in advance of the meeting, because I think we've had a couple of situations where there's been verbal conversation about language changes, but nothing given to us in black and white. And I'm a person that have to see it on paper, not verbally. So just, I would appreciate whatever we do, not just this policy, but in the policy, that we keep that in mind, please.
That is a very good point, and I know that you do not need reminding, but I'm going to do it on the record anyway. Don't send those things to each other. If you have language that you would like to see, either send it to myself, or Mr. Murphy, send it to Yvette, and let someone other than you distribute it, and there needs to be no conversation about it. It's just a distribution. Remember, the communication. A sunshine communication requires two things, a message and a response. You can get a message, don't give it a response.
All right, Ms. Fields, anything else?
No, sir, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bridges. All right, board members, that is our new business item, and we will work on getting that on a work session in days ahead. And at this point, I would like to transition to board member comments. Ms. Wyatt?
Sorry, I was just going to ask if anybody has those, can we send them to Mr. Murphy, if that's okay? Just since I know that you're going to be leaving us shortly.
Shall I?
And I'll connect with him. Thank you.
All right, board members, any comments? Updates, committee updates, anything like that? Mr. Sharpless, you're recognized.
I just want to speak for my role in Polk Vision with the operating board, well as I might be stealing some of Board Member Wyatt's thunder on this with her as being on the board of directors, but attended Polk Vision's annual meeting this past month, and the refresh of the vision from 20 years ago. So I believe board members, Superintendent Hyde, you did deliver all of the thick packets of the board revisions, correct? Or revisioning from Polk Vision. I highly suggest all board members peruse that. A lot of great works happening from Polk Vision. Also want to say congratulations to Ms. Winchester for being a part of Polk Vision Class 18. Looking forward to being classmates with you there. So that's all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sharpless. Sure, Superintendent?
I apologize, sir. I mean, there just wasn't an opportunity, and I should have added it to the talking points. I just wanted to remind the board that today the county commissioners met for the second time about potential changes to the impact fees. My understanding is they will have one additional meeting, and then they have basically a timeline in which to formally approve and adopt any proposed changes. Obviously, I have kept you looped in on the topic and the potential impact, positive impact of Polk County Public Schools. I will be drafting a letter of support that I will be sending to the county commissioners on behalf of my office. I would ask the board members to review that, and I'll work with Mr. Bridges to determine the best manner in which, so if you are willing to sign on to that, very much appreciate that. I think the county commissioners need to understand our position on this, regardless of a phase-in or an emergency effort to go ahead and move it to 100% allocation and starting in year one can be a further topic for discussion, but I think we need to show our support. As far as raising the impact fees, I appreciate that they took the time to review that and ensure that we would have appropriate funding moving forward, or more appropriate funding. I'm not going to say fully appropriate funding, more appropriate funding for us to address the growth that's happening in our school district, especially in the Northeast. And so this would be a huge benefit to us, and we're still working on getting you some final numbers as to what this would look like financially year after year, what additional revenue might we see out of these impact fees moving forward. So we'll finalize those calculations and get those to you. But unfortunately, staff vacations and things like that, I will not bother them while they're on vacation and ask them, because as much as I'll ask them to do that, they'll do it while they're traveling with their family or friends, and that's not fair to them. So I'll get that information to you some point this week.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, sir.
And just on a follow-up too, as we're speaking about growth, I know we got an update on Friday as well. I don't know if you can, just on record, speak to the high school update and where that's at.
Mr. Pitts?
So during the month of August, we had the two groups come in and give us an in-person presentation of what they had submitted to us. And then last week, each group came in. We had 34 pre-designed questions that they answered for us, and we had an opportunity, an evaluation team had an opportunity to ask additional questions of them. And I have the scoring from that, and I have not had a chance to give it to Mr. Hyde yet, but I will do that after this meeting. And then he may have additional information to bring to you later today, at his discretion.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Pitts.
Yes.
And then just one last thing, board members, speaking of letters of support, I am sending a letter of support to the city of Lakeland on behalf of Joe Parker, and we're all familiar with Joe Parker. He is working on an initiative with the Police Athletic League Fieldhouse Capital campaign in Lakeland, and I know that we've been an advocate of the summer trade academies for the last couple years and the expansion of that as well. So me personally, I was going to send a letter of support in regards to that Fieldhouse Capital campaign for that POW piece, and I don't know if anybody else would be interested in that as your role as a board member. I'd be willing to share a form letter, what I'm working on, and sending that way. So I will pass it off to Yvette once I have mine locked in. I know he's got a pretty quick turnaround as he's trying to get it to some committee and other places. So, but if you're willing to support that initiative, that would be greatly appreciated in the work that he's doing. Oh. Ms. Fields, you're recognized.
I want to go back to Superintendent Hyde's comments about the letter that he's doing for the county. And then I want to talk about the letter that you're doing as well. And in the past, we've always had discussion about whatever the letter might be and garner support from the board members, either yes or no. And then we get the letter, and it is reviewed by everybody, and then we sign it. So if Superintendent Hyde, if you need us to do that, I think we just need to agree today. We're not voting, we're just agreeing that we're all in support of the letter, and once it's done, we can figure out how to get it signed. And the same thing for the letter that you're speaking of, rather than just having 4 and 5 different letters from board members. I think it just makes more sense to have one letter. That's just my take on it.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Mr. Bridges, I don't know if this would be something, I know we spoke earlier about this comment as a...
We'll figure out how best to comply with sunshine and accomplish that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, we'll do that.
And I know it was noted that it could be in a resolution form, and I don't know if that's something that you would like, Mr. Hyde?
I apologize. I didn't mean to put the board in that position. I was simply stating I was going to issue a letter from my position and not speak on behalf of the board. However, I'd be happy to bring it to the board and see if there is consensus amongst the board members to sign on with that letter. But it was not my intention to put the board in that position today. I'd like to draft that, share a copy, and then we'll work with Mr. Bridges to make sure I address it in the most appropriate manner.
Certainly, and my understanding was that there was a question of quick turnaround.
Correct.
So if it's something that requires the board to approve it,
But we have
Then,
almost 30 days before the next meeting. We have plenty of time between
good,
now and then.
we can get that done.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bridges. And I was going to address Ms. Fields as well. There was a quick turnaround for the one for Joe Parker. I think he was needing that letter of support by Thursday, so that's why I was just going to do it from an individual standpoint. But if that's something that you'd be interested in doing, I'm not sure if you would like it handled differently.
I don't know enough about it, but I'd be more than interested. I'm sure everybody here would be interested in knowing specifically what you're speaking of, and if we were in support, then I just say one letter rather than 7,
Sure.
or however many people want to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Mr. Sharpless, you're recognized.
I was just going to say I support both of them. So you can add my name to it.
Thank you, Mr. Sharpless. Ms. Miller?
Thank you. I appreciate, am I on? I don't know. I appreciate that you have shared, because we often send letters in support of different things happening, and several of us have been involved and visited the program that Joe is working on. But with the quick turnaround, I don't know if you can facilitate it for the, if other people want to join that, if there's a way to do that, that's fine. If not, I would hope that maybe he could even come and have a presentation and help provide that knowledge so we can all be in support of the trades programs that are happening over the summer. But thank you.
Thank you. All right, board members, if there's no other business to come before the board, we will reconvene at 2:30 for our special meeting. This meeting is now adjourned.